Is the administration right that Israel needs to do more to protect civilians in Gaza?
Well, I think Israel is committed to following the law of armed conflict. One thing I want to say for sure is Israel's not engaged in genocide. And then another thing we need to deal with is the whitewashing of the status of people in Gaza. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would love to be free from Hamas, but the most radicalized people on the planet live in the Gaza Strip. They've been taught since birth to kill and hate the Jews. How do you teach math in Gaza? If you had 10 Jews and you kill 6, how many would be left? That's been in their school system. So I'm all for providing humanitarian aid in a fashion that doesn't help Hamas. I'm all for Israel having the time and space to destroy Hamas. I'm all for a new governing regime over the Palestinian people when this is over. And I'm all for Israel and Saudi Arabia reconciling. That's sort of where I'm at.
But no pause? No humanitarian pause?
I don't want to take the pressure off Hamas militarily, but if Israel can find a way to help the humanitarian situation, yes, I'd like to do it. But after World War II, did anybody ask us these questions? You got to realize the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on cities in Japan to end the war. I think this is total war between Israel and Hamas.
Look, it's precision that we're trying to do. I know Israel well enough. I dealt with them for 2 years every day, and they want to save every single life. They want to bring every hostage home. And so America should be working with them on how to do that. But you don't do that with a pause. You do that by understanding what is the threat to the hostages and what is the threat to America. The threat to all of them is Iran. Iran is waving, their flag telling Hamas what to do. They told Hamas to go and kill 1,400 Jewish people. They're the ones telling Hamas what to do. We have to make sure Iran knows there will be hell to pay if they hurt any of our people. This is our fight. It became our fight when we had, 33 Americans die there on that day, October 7th. It is our fight because they took hostages. But this is what I'll tell you. Whether you see in these pro-Hamas rallies around the country, which makes me sick to my stomach, because you are really focusing, rallying, and supporting a group that says death to America. So, first of all, we don't support any violence whatsoever, and the fact that they're doing this on campuses is one thing. But the second thing is understand that Iran is doing this in conjunction with Russia and China. See this holy alliance for what it is. You've got China sending Iran billions of dollars by importing all of their oil. You've got Russia. Basically, what did they do? Russia's first call wasn't to Netanyahu when this happened in Israel. Who did he call? He called Hamas and told them to come to Russia. And in turn, Hamas said that Russia was their greatest friend.
Ceasefire now! Save the children of Gaza! الله وإنا إليه راجعون مقتدى الصدر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Hello everybody, my name is Alex and this is Reportify Media. Tonight is very important and I want to thank you, all the viewers from around the world, joining myself and Scott Ritter today on this crucial live stream. We're here to address a topic that has ignited passions, sparked debates, and even divided the world for far too long. I'm sure you, your friends and family have talked about this conflict, the Palestine and Israeli conflict. I'm here before you not as an expert, but as someone deeply moved by the emotions that this conflict evokes. Truly, I've had a tough week seeing images spread all throughout social media and our TV stations. Wow, it is really amazing footage to see, and to try to understand it and take it all in is another event that I'm really struggling to understand. Together we hope to gain a better understanding of this complex issue at hand. Now I know emotions are running high on both sides of this conflict. The suffering, the pain, the loss of life, and the longing for a peaceful resolution here. You know, we are gathered here all as individuals on this live stream. Every one of us will have an opinion, but I'm also here to gain insight, to try to promote an understanding, and maybe, just maybe, take one step closer to finding a solution. Now there are nations out there that are prepared to divide you and me and divide all of us, and politicians are prepared to sell us out at any cost. Even some are marching us to World War III that you just seen on the opening presentation I had while you were waiting backstage for us. We have a special guest with us today, someone who has been very integral part of this live streams for the last couple of months. He has dedicated his life to studying and analyzing conflicts just like this. Our esteemed guest, Scott Ritter, is a distinguished expert with a wealth of knowledge and international relations and conflict resolution. Scott is amazing, and I am so blessed to have him here with us tonight. He will help us unravel the complexities of the Palestine and Israel conflict, including an update on Ukraine. I know you've all asked for that. Now, he will also provide insights that go beyond the headlines and the political rhetoric. That is for sure. But before we dive into this discussion, I want to acknowledge the powerful emotions this topic elicits, the images of suffering, the voices of the oppressed, and the dreams of a better future, and the deep-rooted fear of further violence. All of these emotions are valid, and we respect them. We hope to foster a space of empathy, understanding, and open dialogue. It's crucial to remember that we all share this world together, and this conflict affects us all. Let's approach this live stream and conversation with open hearts, open minds, seeking to bridge divides and build bridges together towards peace. Now, without further ado, I am honored to introduce you to our guest, Scott Ritter, and thank you once again for joining Reportify Media. Welcome to the program, Scott.
There we are. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know if we're having a technical glitch or not, but
Okay, Scott, I'm here with you.
there we go.
So, yes, thank you for that. Scott, we've seen Gaza genocide, we've seen bombing of civilians, forcible transfer, destruction of homes. I'm just looking at the Israeli playbook here. Refugee camp airstrikes, attacks on journalists, shellings of the UN RWA schools, destroying fields, trees, usage of banned white phosphorus, attacks on paramedics. Where are we going with this?
Well, I mean, first of all, this is a standard Israeli practice, put on on a larger stage. Israel has been the illegal, illegitimate occupier of Palestine since 1948. We have to go back and acknowledge that the birth of Israel was done at the expense of the Palestinian people. The Nakba, or the catastrophe, the forceful expulsion of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes, the murder of thousands. This is what Israel was born from. I'm not unsympathetic to an Israeli state. I'm not unsympathetic to a Jewish homeland in the Middle East. The history of the Jews is a long and tragic history with, just in the last century, we saw a Holocaust that killed millions of Jews. They were singled out for genocidal murder by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany. And so, and prior to that, there were pogroms in Ukraine, pogroms in Russia. There were, the slaughter of Jews dating back to the First Crusade. So it's not as if the Jewish people felt at home in Europe. And should there be a place for anybody to feel safe in, to feel secure, to raise a family, to be able to practice your religion freely without fear of prosecution? Absolutely. I mean, I call it the United States of America. We're not perfect, but I'm not someone here. You're going to hear me be very critical of Israel today. I'm very critical, but I'm not critical of Jews. I'm not critical of the Jewish faith. How can I be? I'm an American. The whole premise of my country is based on freedom of religion, freedom of expression. This isn't about being anti-Jewish. This is about the way Israel has manifested itself, the political Zionism, the weaponization of political Zionism, and the consequences of that. The Palestinian people that exploded in violence, their cause that manifested itself on the October 7th attacks on Israel by Hamas, it didn't just happen out of the blue. It's part of a continuing process of frustration, of violence being inflicted on them and by them that manifested itself in this manner. So it's not as though I'm saying, goodbye Israel, but I am saying goodbye political Zionism, because political Zionism is behind this concept of Israeli supremacy. Again, as an American, I take umbrage at anybody, even America. I'm very critical of America when we say we are the exceptional nation. I get very mad at politicians when they say, God bless America. I'm like, why? Why does God bless America? We're humans, all of us, made by God, if you believe in religion. And to say God bless America is really what you're saying is God damn the rest of the world. And I don't mean that in a curse word. I just mean the damnation of the rest of the world by God. That's what the implication of this is. So when the Jewish Zionists speak of the need for a Jewish homeland predicated on biblical notions of a greater Israel, where they are exceptional, they are God's chosen people, and everybody else is something other than God's chosen people, I have a problem with that, and so does the rest of the world. Now, I respect people's religious beliefs, but I can't support your religious beliefs if your religious beliefs are built upon the notion of imposing your will on others because you claim to have some sort of God-given superiority. I'm violently against the Banderas in Ukraine. We've had this conversation before. And the Western Ukrainian Banderas believe in the supremacy of the pure Western Ukrainian race. This is why they treat the Russians, the Poles, the Jews as subhumans. This was the foundational notion of Nazi Germany, the supremacy of the Aryan race, the master race, the Übermensch. So I can't support an Israel that's predicated on the notion of Jewish exclusivity, especially when the exclusivity comes at, holding the sword in your hand, as David Ben-Gurion, the founder of Israel, spoke of, as Moshe Dayan, one of the founders of Israel, talked about, the sword in the hand, holding back the Palestinians whose land they admit they stole. They stole the land. They murdered the Palestinians, and therefore understand that this relationship we're talking about today is of an occupier and an occupied. And this is an important legal predicate, because there's people out there saying that Israel has an inherent right to self-defense. And under normal circumstances, you could articulate a case. You could make a cognizable case that Israel was attacked, therefore they defend. But the occupier never gets to cite self-defense. The occupier never gets to point at a problem that comes from within the zone of the occupied that manifests itself violently on the occupier. They say, we have a right to defend ourselves. No, you don't. You don't have a right to defend yourself. You are in the wrong because you are the occupier. And the United States has been playing, games, political games for years to ignore this aspect of Israel. Just like we ignore the fact that Israel is in violation, open violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and our own laws. Because of Israel's nuclear weapons program, our own laws would prohibit us from engaging in the kind of trade and military on military relations. We play silly games where we pretend that's not happening. deliberate ambiguity about the nuclear weapons. It's not a nuclear weapon until it's introduced. No, it's a nuclear weapon. It's there. In fact, one of the Israeli ministers alluded to a nuclear weapon as a potential solution to the Gaza problem. See where we're going on this one? So this is problematic in the extreme. I don't condone the murder of innocent civilians. But again, let me just remind people out there about a historical precedent. In the lead up to the invasion of Normandy back in 1944, Charles de Gaulle, who was the leader of the Free French, was approached by American, British military planners who said, hey, we're going in hard. You know, it's war. We're coming across the beach. We're hitting them with the airplanes, the whole thing. And we got to bomb some places like the city of Caen. We got to bomb it. And people are going to die. French civilians are going to die. And de Gaulle said, how many? And they said, tens of thousands. He said, that's the price we have to pay for freedom and for liberty. 60,000 French civilians lost their lives in that campaign. 60,000 lost their lives. Now, what price do we put on the freedom of the Palestinian people? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about an enslaved population, a population, especially in Gaza, that's been put in this open-air concentration camp. What price do we put on their freedom? And again, I speak as an American whose nation was born of revolution to liberate ourselves from the tyranny of the tyrant king in England. So, you know, we know that there is a need historically for revolution at times to liberate oneself from oppressive regimes. The Palestinian people are screaming for liberation, screaming for freedom. And so they manifest their desire violently on October 7th in what was a masterful military operation, but you're not allowed to say that. You see, the moment Israel acknowledges that they got beaten a stand-up fight, let me just put it out here, guys. The Battle of Hue City, I'm a Marine, I always cite Marine Corps stuff. The Battle of Hue City was the largest urban battle fought during the Vietnam War. It unfolded over the course of 3 to 4 days, longer if you count some of the follow-up actions. And the Marines lost 200 and some odd Marines killed in that. The bloodiest battle. Israel lost that in one day fighting Hamas. Now, if we're going to call the Battle of Hue City a battle between two opposing forces fighting one another, what do we call what happened along the Gaza barrier on October 7th? It was not an act of terrorism. These weren't terrorists that came across the wall. These were soldiers of Islam, soldiers of Hamas, soldiers of the Palestinian people who took the Israeli army on in a stand-up fight and beat them. Beat them. The Golani Brigade, 2 battalions, the 13th and the 51st, were beat in a stand-up fight. Other units were likewise beat in a stand-up fight. There's a surprise attack. Scott knew it was a morning attack. There was no surprise attack because the Israeli intelligence service was there watching this the whole time. They knew it was coming. The political leadership was asleep, but don't blame Hamas for the leadership failure of Israel. Israel cannot acknowledge that what happened on October 7th was a military action, because to do so, they would have to acknowledge the scope and scale of their collective failure. So it becomes a terrorist action. But if you don't define a problem properly, you can't come up with a solution to the problem. And because Israel chooses to define this as a terrorist action, their solution is bogging down into nothing. This is why, even though we see Israeli troops on the ground in Gaza, understand that controlling the ground above ground means nothing when Hamas has spent years going underground. When they have tens of thousands of fighters 70, 80, 90, 100 meters underground in tunnels and systems that were prepared for this very action to survive 80 to 90 days with the Israelis on top. This is a military operation. This is not terrorism. This is the manifestation of the legitimate desire of the Palestinian people to enjoy the same things we all claim we want to enjoy. And I will put this out there to every freedom-loving person watching this. If you lived in Gaza, you would support Hamas, or you're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not worthy of a family. If you don't support those who are seeking your freedom, seeking to define you collectively as a nation, as a people worthy of the dignity that comes with having a national title attached to you, so that you can live as equals with the Israelis, subordinate to no one but your own self-determination. If you're not saying that that's what you would demand, then you're a liar. You're an absolute liar. No American would tolerate what's going on in Gaza today. No European would tolerate living under those conditions. And yet somehow we expect the Palestinian people to tolerate it not 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 75 years, and in perpetuity. No. What happened on October 7th was not a terrorist act. It was a military operation carried out by the military arm of a people who are fed up with Israeli occupation.
Scott, grab some water. Have a drink. Oh, my friend. This is, I knew this was going to be very emotional live stream here today. We have a question that came up on the screen here. I just caught it. Most of these we can't bring up or answer most of them during the show. If you do want to send some super chats in there, that will definitely highlight some of the questions that we can bring onto the program. This one was from Kamal. Netanyahu says that Israel will control the Gaza security after the war. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, it means that Netanyahu doesn't have a plan. He doesn't know what he's doing. Let's just remember, it's to set up the answer to that question, we have to go back to October 6th. On October 6th, Benjamin Netanyahu and the rest of the collective Israeli leadership believed that Hamas was an organization dedicated to the continued governance of Gaza, but governance as dictated by Israel, the conditions of governance as dictated by Israel, meaning to control an open-air concentration camp, to be little more than the capos of the Israeli Nazi masters, capo being a term coming from the Nazi concentration camps, a Jewish prisoner who works together with the leadership of the camp to impose rules, regulations, order amongst the Jewish prisoners who are waiting to be slaughtered. So Hamas should be, in the eyes of the Israelis, their capos over their concentration camp. The Israeli military was asleep on the same night, October 6th, October 7th. The chief of staff of the Israeli army, together with the heads of the intelligence organizations, were meeting about intelligence reports that were coming in from the guys on the line saying, hey, Hamas is up to something. We've been seeing them training, or they're massing, they're moving, they've been doing rehearsals. We think they're coming over the wall. You guys might want to call an alarm, stand to, that's a Marine Corps term. I think the Army might use it, but I always fall back on my Marine Corps background. Stand to, that's what happens right before the beginning of, the morning twilight. You get all your Marines up, facing outwards, waiting for the attack, because that's when the enemy comes over historically. Historically, the enemy attacks at dawn. And so stand to, call in the people who are on leave. And it's the biggest religious holiday. Didn't you guys do this 50 years ago? Send everybody home on leave on Yom Kippur, only to have the Egyptians come across the Suez Canal in a surprise attack. Wow. So they're sitting there debating it, and they said, yeah, this is politically sensitive. We don't want to do that. So we'll just talk about it in the morning. Well, they did talk about it in the morning because Hamas came over the wire. And now these leaders, these same people who failed the Israeli people, they are responsible for security of the Israeli people, and they failed. Benjamin Netanyahu failed. The entire Netanyahu government failed. These are losers. These are failures. And now they're trying to pretend that somehow they're in charge. So when you're trying to pretend you're in charge, you say really stupid things. Benjamin Netanyahu's statement, talking about Gaza, implies that somehow Israel is in control. Hey, Benjamin, you haven't been in control since the morning of October 7th. Hamas has been dictating the scope, scale, pace of this operation. They lured you into a trap. I think people need to understand that. The Israeli army going into Gaza, two things about it. One, the Israelis didn't have a plan. They've done an exercise last year and this year, Chariots of Fire last year, Firm Hand this year, where they stress test the entire Israeli Defense Force in terms of what happens if everybody attacks us at once. And you say, well, Scott, so they should be prepared for this, right? No, because the big attack that they were worried about came from Hezbollah out north. That's where the bulk of the Israeli military went up with. The supporting attack was from Iran, sending missiles in, so they were ready for that. Defending the Golan Heights, they were ready for that. The West Bank and Gaza were written off as civil unrest, limited terrorist attacks. Israel has never conceived what happened on October 7th, never. And as a result, they're making the plan up. Normally, if you're a professional military organization, you have a cabinet out there where you have a plan for everything. They hired people like me, to sit there and say, write contingency plans, Ritter. What if, what do we do? And I wrote contingency plans for Iran a lot. They had no plan for this. So they're making it up as it goes along. They mobilized 300,000 guys and they go, what do we do with them? We don't know. We're going to have to launch a large-scale ground incursion. But what does that mean? Why, if you're going to launch a large-scale ground incursion, would you therefore come in and execute the mowing the grass doctrine, the Dahiwa principle? Bombing civilian population is collective punishment, a war crime, by the way, but you're dropping buildings, creating a city of rubble. Have you tried to drive a tank through a rubble-strewn street? Can't do it, guys. And we learned, from history. Ask the Germans about Stalingrad. What happened when you bombed Stalingrad into rubble and the Soviet soldiers dug in? How hard was it to pull them out? Impossible. Ask the Americans, the British, the Canadians, the Indians, the Poles about Monte Cassino in 1944, where we blew up a ancient religious site, created rubble, and the 6th German parachute division went into the rubble and held us off for months. The Israelis didn't think this thing through. So Netanyahu's saying things. We're going to be in charge of security. One, he's in charge of nothing because he hasn't secured the top. They've taken the easy corridors around, but they haven't secured the rubble. Two, what happens on top ain't where the war is being fought. The war is being fought by Hamas below ground, where they are popping up. Just last night, they destroyed 10 Israeli vehicles. 10 Israeli vehicles by popping up and attacking them with rocket-propelled grenades. 10. I don't know how many Israelis they killed, but this is going to be a death by 1,000 cuts for the Israelis. They're talking about a war that could last a year. Now, I'm not saying Hamas is going to enjoy this kind of success every night, but 365 days a year times 10, that's 3,650 some odd destroyed vehicles. Add the manpower to that, it's unsustainable losses for Israel. The other thing is, by saying you're going to occupy Gaza, the security, he's trying to come up with a solution to how you resolve the political issue of Hamas. It's one thing to say that you're going to go in and kill Hamas commanders. They're trying. They're not succeeding right now, but we're only 1 month into a war that's going to go on for many months unless rational thinking intervenes. But how do you destroy the idea? How do you destroy the idea? And so what he's saying is we're going to have to occupy. This shows you how stupid the man is, because the idea behind Hamas is born of occupation. The idea behind Hamas is legitimized by occupation. And so this idiot, Benjamin Netanyahu, says, we will control Gaza. We will occupy Gaza. Does he not understand that he's playing the Hamas game? Hamas has lured him into this trap. Hamas is winning across the board. There's not one aspect of this fight that Hamas is not winning, because everything's going according to the Hamas plan. I don't know if Hamas predicted the millions of people in the streets around the world, but that's a Hamas victory. That's a huge Hamas victory, because it's putting a horrendous amount of pressure, not on Israel, but also on the United States, Israel's #1 supporter. Right now, we have political divisions inside the White House, inside the State Department. There is open revolts, people resigning because they're saying our policy with Israel is unsupportable, unsustainable. And so we are putting pressure on Israel to do that which they say they will never do. Ceasefire. They're going to call it a pause because politically you can't call it what it really is. But a ceasefire, to implement a ceasefire, is a defeat for Israel, not because it really benefits Hamas. Hamas is ready for a 90-day war. They don't need a ceasefire. But because Israel is committed that they will never have a ceasefire, the moment they agree to a ceasefire, it's a political loss. It begins the process of Israel backing down from its hardline positions until they have to respect reality. And the reality is, you ain't going to beat Hamas.
Scott, you called it on this program 2 months ago. I went back just before I did the live stream today, and I remember you saying, I brought up a question. I think it was one of our first live streams, maybe even 3 months ago. And I asked you, the Israelis, they're using artificial intelligence. And it was you on this very program that said, watch, there's going to be a way that they get in there and they can manipulate that AI to fail. And that's exactly what has happened here. The AI failed. This is one of the most talked about military intelligence countries in the world, and they got their ass kicked. I mean, you said it on this program. I'm going to go over to a Twitter tweet that you put out, or an X, formerly known as Twitter. You sent this to Robert Kennedy Jr. You said, the tide has turned against Israel. If the trajectory stays on track, the state of Israel and the Israeli people run the risk of losing everything. Underlined, everything again. I mean, could this be the end of Israel?
It could be the end of political Zionism. And I would think that would be a good thing if there is a safety net. I am not advocating for the termination of the Israeli state. I am not advocating for the violent expression of from the river to the sea. A lot of people interpret that as the expulsion of the Israeli people. But if you believe in the one-state solution, from the river to the sea means that you're going to create a single state where Jews, Muslims, Christians live together as equals. That's why it's pretty difficult for the United States to articulate a single state solution. We continue to buy into a two-state solution, but a two-state solution where you have a separate Jewish state, a separate Arab state, Muslim and Christian, living side by side. That's always been the political Zionist plan, because they can manipulate that notion, as they have successfully done over the years. The Abraham Accord is the most modern manifestation of this manipulation to create conditions, to dictate conditions of Palestinian statehood that are so unrealistic that there will never be a Palestinian state. So this is why a lot of people today are saying, we don't want a two-state solution. We're looking for a one-state solution. A one-state solution, however, cannot exist without the strategic defeat, the total defeat of political Zionism. That is the underlying philosophy that created the Israeli state to begin with. A separate Jewish homeland must be terminated, and Israel must be reimagined as a place in the Middle East where people of all faiths can live together, Jewish, Christian, Muslim. This is more difficult to do. One of the reasons why it's difficult to do is we're never allowed to think it. Because the moment you talk about this, the moment you articulate anything that is seen as being anti-Zionist Israel, you're called anti-Semitic. I mean, we see right now American politicians trying to say that if you criticize Zionism, if you speak out against Zionism, you're anti-Semitic. No, not at all. Not at all. You're just anti-fascist Israel. I mean, that's the reality. But Congress has been bought and paid for by the pro-Israeli American, the pro-Israeli lobby here in America. Don't say, Scott, you're anti-Semitic. How dare you repeat? That's blood libel. That's another term they always throw out there. That's blood libel. No, it's not. Ariel Sharon has openly bragged about buying the U.S. Congress. He was a prime minister of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu likewise openly brags about buying the U.S. Congress. Heck, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, this Jewish lobby, that pro-Israeli lobby in Washington, D.C., brags about how they control Congress. Think of it, ladies and gentlemen, at a time when Democrats and Republicans are fighting over every single issue here in the United States. Heck, today's election day, we get to see it played out live and in color. Why do, when AIPAC opens up its annual forum, why do they all flock there like subservient slaves and sit there and just effuse praise for Israel? Democrats and Republicans alike. Why? Because guess who writes the campaign checks? Guess who keeps these guys who come there from being primary? That's the kiss of death in the political business, especially for a 2-year representative. You come in, you have 2 years. If you have to prepare for a primary about a year into your office, it means you're not doing a good job. You're not doing your real job. You're fighting. You're spending all your money preparing to be primary. You're not even going up against your principal opponent. You're going to lose the election. And the pro-Israeli lobby plays on this by telling them, not only will we not fund you, but we will fund your opponent in a primary. Congress is bought and paid for. The United States is controlled by Israel. There is no real criticism here in Israel of Israel today in the United States. You're not allowed to be critical. And that's the worst thing you can do to a friend. I used to be 2 feet in the Israeli camp. I mean, I think I may have told you that, but I've said that before. I'm not one of these guys that have spent my whole life, with a free Palestine flag. I didn't wear the keffiyeh around my neck, in symbolic, brotherhood with the PLO. Not my style. My style was, I was in Israel from 1994 to 1998, working with Israeli intelligence in a very close fashion to resolve the issue of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. My primary function was disarmament, but the secondary function was to keep those missiles that Iraq had used during the Gulf War, which I fought in, by the way, to attack Israel. I was involved in the campaign to stop them from attacking Israel, to prevent it from happening again. And I worked at the highest levels with the Israeli intelligence service to resolve this issue. I fell in love with Israel. This is why what's happening right now just breaks my heart, because I loved Israel. might have been naive about Israel. I mean, I have to be honest, my host was very good about opening me up to the complexities of the situation. He lived in a village. As you go from Tel Aviv up towards Jerusalem, you come up to what they call the Green Line. That's the 1967 boundary of borders. And he lived in a village, and he, on the Israeli side, and he pointed over. He said, "See that hill over there?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That's on the other side of the Green Line. See that village over there with the mosque?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's Palestinian village." He said, "Understand that this is where we were in a barbecue, by the way, him and his neighbors were having a barbecue." He said, "This is where I raised my family. This is where you're a military guy. What does the high ground mean?" I said, "Well, mortars, snipers, observed fire." He goes, "Yeah. So if we go to war against them, we're going to die. My family's going to die. They're going to pay the price. I want peace. We want peace." This was during Yitzhak Rabin's prime minister, when he was prime minister. Yitzhak Rabin's the prime minister that's got the Oslo Accords, Oslo I, Oslo II. He was assassinated by a right-wing Jewish fanatic who was a supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu, assassinated because he was pursuing peace. But that's the Israel I fell in love with. I fell in love with the Israel that when a bomb went off 100 yards from my hotel and there were bodies in the streets, they went out there, they picked up the bodies, they swept off the debris, they picked themselves up, wiped off the tears, dusted themselves, and went on, not in revenge, saying we have to have peace. This is why we have to have peace. And you know who was blowing up those bombs? Hamas, a terrorist organization back then. But what did Benjamin Netanyahu do? He took Hamas, a terrorist organization, and turned it into a political organization and gave them, through elections that Israel funded and supported to divide the Palestinian population, he put them in charge of governance of Gaza. And now Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, what he's really saying is, I got to make up for the mistake I made because I, Benjamin Netanyahu, put them in charge in Gaza. I'm the one that made them govern. And let's reflect on that term governance, because you hear a lot of that from the Israelis. Hamas should be in the business of governing. Okay, I'm going to elect all of you right now, mayor of Gaza. You're the mayor of Gaza now. You're in charge of governing all these 2 million plus people. And wait a minute, you're the mayor of a city under occupation. You want your people to travel freely, but they can't. You want to have a sound economy, but you can't. The Israelis are in control of the economy. Every once in a while, they come in and bomb people. They don't let you have an airport. They don't let you have a port. They don't let you live in normal. You're in charge of governance. What would a leader of a population subjected to that do? Try to change that reality. And what happens when you run into a brick wall with the international community? You go to the United Nations, they pass resolution after resolution after resolution after resolution, condemning the Israeli actions as war crimes, as violation of international law. But when you take it up to the Security Council, the United States vetoes it, so there's no meaningful action. And now you see there, look at all the people supporting, Palestine, and then put up the slide. I'm sure there's one out there, or is it the red? Yeah, the red dots are the people who voted against. So this happens all the time.
Or America something.
Yeah, no, this happens all the time, where the majority of the world supports the Palestinian cause, but the United States leads a handful. And trust me, I was at the United Nations. All those red dots that don't say America or Israel, they're up there because we bribe them, we bully them, we intimidate them, we threaten them, we cajole them. I know this because I watched it happen with similar votes about Iraq. But my point is that if you're in charge of governing Gaza and your people are suffering, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it 70 years in? If you're in charge of governing and your responsibility is to these people, you're going to go to war. You're going to go to war. And that's exactly what Hamas did. They went to war.
I mean, is Hamas going to succeed in this? I mean, we look around the Middle East, and I've had a lot of people say, where is the Middle East countries? Why are they not getting involved? And can Hamas and Hezbollah do this on their own? Well,
we need to be, again, just straight up honest about this. The Palestinian problem has been used by the Arabs to benefit themselves. They use it to weaken Israel by... the last thing Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf Arab states want is stability with Israel while they were, I'd say pre-Abrams Accord, because they weren't having normalized relations with Israel. It empowered them to have this confrontation with Israel. They used it for domestic political purposes. Egypt, Jordan especially, with this Palestinian refugee majority, can't have any more come over. So they have to create, this constant theme of instability, etc. So the Palestinian people have not had any real Arab support. Everybody gives lip service to them. Some people provide money to them. But they're providing money not because they care about the Palestinian people, but because they care about the instability that the Palestinian problem creates for Israel, diverting tremendous amount of resources, etc., about this ongoing security situation, so that Israel's looking within and not able to look without, because that's what really scares them is, the fear of the Israeli military, Israeli economic strength moving outwards. The Abrams Accord was designed to break that paradigm. The Abrams Accord was designed to nullify the Palestinian state. And notice what I'm saying, nullify, which means that nullification comes with the concurrence of Palestine's Arab neighbors. So anybody waiting for the Arabs to do the right thing, and again, you have to understand that the Palestinians knew that not only was Israel never going to change their policies about occupation, but the Arab world had grown indifferent to the need of a Palestinian state. One by one, they were getting picked off by American diplomacy, the Abrams Accord, to normalize relationships. And the big kahuna in the room, Saudi Arabia, was on the verge, final negotiations for normalization when Hamas carried out their attack. But Hamas has been betrayed over and over again. Hezbollah and Iran, first of all, understand that Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood-based Islamic organization that's Sunni. Hezbollah is Shia, Iran's Shia. Oil and water, man, they don't mix. Also understand that up until 2022, Hamas was in open warfare with the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad. There's Palestinian refugee camps outside of Damascus with a significant Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad presence who fought side by side with Al-Qaeda, Sunni-based, ISIS, Sunni-based. So it became a Sunni versus Shia thing, or in this case, Alawite, sort of an offshoot of the Shia faith in Syria. But so that was happening. So there was that dynamic. They made peace. They've repaired relations, and both Hamas and Iran have articulated support for the Palestinian cause. But are they really doing it because they care about the Palestinian people, or are they doing it for political purposes? That's only a question that Hassan Nasrallah can answer or Ibrahim Raisi can answer. But I think it's probably a little bit of both. I do believe that they're very anti-Israel, and therefore a Palestinian state would be good for them. But on the other hand, these are Sunnis, and they haven't gotten along historically. So the Palestinians are very much on their own. Look, Hassan Nasrallah gave a speech last Friday where he said, we didn't know anything about this. And he's telling the truth. Everybody's like, oh, this was an Iranian plan. Why do you have to say it was an Iranian plan? Because how else do you explain what Hamas did? You don't want to say that Hamas, as you pointed out, whipped us from an intelligence standpoint, that they became the ghost in the AI-driven intelligence machine of Israel and fooled them, that Hamas put together this carefully orchestrated plan and executed it professionally by themselves. That would scare the living you-know-what out of people. No. Rather than give Hamas credit, you say, Iran did it. Iran, the boogeyman. Blame Iran. Iran does everything. They got nuclear weapons. They got Iran, the evil people. No. Hezbollah. No. They were taken by surprise. Hassan Nasrallah said, we had no idea it was coming, and it wasn't until October 9th that we were able to put together some sort of response. But he also said that Hamas doesn't need our help. They don't want our help. And that's as important, because people keep talking about the threat of escalation, bringing in a northern front, etc. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Hamas doesn't want it. Why would Hamas not want help? Well, because Hamas has a plan that they did derive by themselves. They implemented by themselves. The plan is simple. It's not the destruction of Israel. So for all you people out there saying this is about from the river to the sea, no, it's not. Let me tell you what it's about, you pro-Zionist idiots out there. It's about the creation of a Palestinian homeland. Serious discussion about the creation of a Palestinian homeland, not the Abrams Accord, not the the mealy-mouthed disingenuousness of the Netanyahu government and every government before him prior to Yitzhak Rabin. But even under Yitzhak Rabin, I mean, two-state solution, it wasn't really. It needed to be developed. We'll never know what he would have done because Netanyahu facilitated his assassination. But the legitimate creation of a Palestinian state. That's what this is about. What's it also about? Thousands of Palestinians are held in Israeli prisons right now without due process. They haven't been charged with any crimes. They're just swept off the street. Hundreds of children are held in Israeli prisons. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. The Israelis go out and they arrest children. Sometimes they arrest them and just break their arms. We've seen the video of the Israeli soldier snapping the arm of a 10-year-old boy because he had the audacity to throw a rock at a tank. Wow, if you're that scared of a rock against a tank, maybe you shouldn't be there to begin with. They captured Palestinian women. Oh, let me tell you else what the Israelis do as a matter of course. This is official policy of Shin Bet, the Israeli domestic intelligence service. When they get a Palestinian woman, they rape her and they film it. They rape her and they film it. And then they release her and they say, you will cooperate with us or else we'll send this video to your family. And the shame that will be brought on the family, she'll probably have to commit suicide. If she doesn't commit suicide, somebody might kill her through honor killing. But that's what the Israeli government does on a regular basis against Palestinian women who they hold in jail. And they just pull anybody who dares speak out against them, anybody, and they jam them into prison. No due process. You're just there forever. Again, we come back to, if you're the governor, you're running the government of Hamas, don't you have an obligation? Look at America, the hypocrisy of it. We have one guy in prison here, one guy in prison there. The American people will not rest. The American government will not rest until all Americans are returned home. Well, thousands of Palestinians, many of them from Gaza, many from the West Bank, are in Israeli prisons right now, and nobody's articulating on their behalf. So Hamas went out and did what historically works. They snatched a bunch of Israelis, and they used them as leverage to get the exchange going. That's what this is about, a hostage exchange for hostages. Israel is holding thousands of Palestinians hostage, torturing them as we speak. They want the exchange. And then the third thing, they want the Al-Aqsa Mosque to be treated with the dignity that it deserves as the third most holy place in Islam. The Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The Israeli government has recently gone in there and disrupted worshipers, beat up women, pull men out, arrest men, desecrate the site. The third holiest site in Islam is desecrated on a daily basis by the Israeli occupier. And they want that terminated because guess what? The Muslim people, the Islamic people, they take their religion just as serious as the Christian people do, just as serious as the Jewish people do. You shouldn't be in the business of desecrating Christian shrines. You shouldn't be in the business of desecrating Jewish shrines. And you damn sure shouldn't be in the business of desecrating Muslim shrines. These are the three things that Hamas wants. They're going to get all three. They're going to get all three, which means Hamas wins. This is a huge victory for Hamas. Now, there's a lot of pressure on Hezbollah and Iran to intervene, and they admit they feel that pressure. But it's a big relief for them to know that Hamas is not asking this or seeking this. And so what you see, again, with Hassan Nasrallah's speech is this very mature process of what is known as horizontal escalation management, meaning he is managing not just Hamas or Hezbollah Israeli things. He's managing every aspect of this. He's managing Hamas Israeli, American, indirectly American Israeli, because by not buying into the notion of immediate Hezbollah intervention, you create more pressure by the United States on Israel to get a ceasefire. Hassan Nasrallah, Ibrahim Raisa are all doing this. Horizontal escalation management. You have a whole bunch of pressure building up in the Middle East because of Israel's outrageous criminal behavior against the Palestinians. And it left to its own devices, these could manifest themselves violently so that you get that escalation. What they are doing together with the United States, the United States, take a look, we're getting attacked. We're getting attacked on a daily basis in Iraq and Syria, but we're not responding full scale. Why? Because we're playing escalation management too. Nobody wants this thing to explode. We have little pressure reliefs. They're violently expressed. In the case of Israel and Hezbollah, this violent expression has resulted in the deaths of somewhere near 60 Hezbollah fighters. A lot more Israeli fighters or soldiers have been killed in this. It's a mini war going on, but it's a war that doesn't move immediately into escalation. They're managing it. At some point in time, as you manage upwards, you might as well call it a war because that's what it is. But the goal here is to resolve the situation in Gaza so that none of these other conflicts blow up out of control.
Scott, I have another comment that I would like to talk to you and ask you about. So we know Nikki Haley has gone off the deep end. Lindsey Graham has joined her as well. My question is the following. I made some notes before I came on this show. And I call it once again, the Israeli playbook, which you can see there. I'll put a link eventually on my description of the video after. But I heard somebody say, okay, you can pretty much bomb anything in Gaza. All you have to say is Hamas was there. So you bomb a bakery, we thought someone from Hamas was there. You bomb a school, we think Hamas was there. Oh, that ambulance that we blew up, yeah, there's a couple of people from Hamas was there. And we hear this continually going through, until we've reached the figure of over 10,000 people have been killed. I mean, what is going to be left of Gaza? The Israelis say that they've split it in two now and encircled the city. I mean, are the Palestinians going to be able to get that territory back, or is this once again another so-called strategy that may end in failure? I'm going to hand it back to you.
Well, remember, war is an extension of politics by other means. So if you're looking at what Israel's doing just purely from a military standpoint, they've put troops on the ground in what they call a limited incursion, but it's expanding, to basically seize control of northern Gaza Strip, the city of Gaza and stuff, because that was considered to be one of the strongholds of Hamas. Going back to what you said, it's not just that if it's a school and Hamas is there. Remember, Hamas is underground, 500 kilometers of tunnels. Israel doesn't know where these tunnels are. So Israel's just making a lot of assumptions. Some of it's intelligence driven, that the tunnels might be under a hospital. They probably are. I mean, I don't know. But again, let's just set the table straight here. Gaza is an occupied territory. The Israelis are the occupiers. So the normal rules and regulations, the occupied have a right to do whatever the hell they want to do to defend themselves. So when they go underground, they don't have to comply with international humanitarian law. You can't use the civilians as a shield. They are the people living there resisting. They are the resistance. And Israel has no right of self-defense. You got to throw away all this logic about Hamas. Every time Israel drops a bomb on Gaza, it's a war crime by definition, because they are the occupied power fighting they're the occupiers fighting the occupied people. But Israel comes up with this again. If their intelligence was so good about where Hamas is, why the heck didn't they know what was going on October 7th? I'm telling you right now, they're just making stuff up. I've seen this before during the Gulf War when we were hunting Scud missiles. Every time the Iraqis fired a Scud missile, we had thousands of aircraft diverted from their primary mission of supporting the ground war effort, diverted out west to hunt down Scud missiles. And they keep firing. We're like, where the hell are they? Where the hell are they? Next thing you know, we're blowing up Bedouin tents. We're blowing up every fuel trucker that comes across. We're blowing up buses of civilians. We're blowing up truck stops. We're blowing up fuel tankers. We're blowing up everything under the premise that it's Scud related. Oh, that looks like a Scud. That looks like a Scud. We were panicked. So we killed everything. It was a war crime. It was a war crime because an important part of using military force is the concept of distinction, that you have to make a clear distinction between that which is a civilian object and that which is a military object. And even if a military object is commingled with a civilian object, you now have to bring in the notion of proportionality, meaning that if we bomb this site, are we getting, is it there sufficient military necessity? What benefit do we get from this from a military standpoint that justifies the loss of civilian life? And in the United States, we've made this known that we will not drop a bomb on a target that kills hundreds. We dropped bombs on Afghan wedding parties before. So yeah, we say one thing, we do another. Guys, I know that. I know we are hypocrites in the extreme, but at least we pretend to go through the notion of being compliant with international humanitarian law. The Israelis don't even pretend. They just do. They call themselves the most moral military in the world. No, they're the most immoral military in the world. And listen to them. They ordered 1 million people out of northern Gaza. They ordered them to move south. That in itself is a war crime. Collective punishment, you can't do that. Now they say anybody who didn't make that move, if you're alive and above ground, we can treat you as a military target. We will assume that you're Hamas. You can't do that. That's against the laws of war. They're not the most moral military in the world. They're the most immoral military in the world, and they're carrying out mass murder on a daily basis.
Scott, something else I want to bring up. Okay, so we keep hearing these sound bits from the mainstream media, and they're talking about the potential genocide that could happen in Israel. And I saw an interesting comeback to that. They were saying, why is, Israel deflecting everybody, saying that this potential genocide is happening when there is an actual genocide happening in Gaza as we speak? I mean, this is brutal occupation, as you say. And as I asked in my last question, are they going to give back, the part that they've just cut in half? Is it going to go back? Are we going to continue to see fighting for a year? Are they going to sit with tanks there for the next 6 months, 9 months? I know you did a calculation. They could be running out of equipment in no time if they keep it up. Your thoughts on that?
Again, war is an extension of politics. So the solution isn't going to be military. We're not looking for Israel to defeat Hamas, because that no military campaign takes place in a political vacuum. Right now, Israel is losing the public relations war around the world. More and more nations are starting to sever diplomatic relations with Israel. The United States is in a quandary of what to do, how to do, because we're paying a heavy political price as well, because we are guilty by implication in terms of our support of Israel. And so there will be a political solution. And that political solution will involve a ceasefire. It'll be very difficult for Israel to continue military operations after a ceasefire begins. I'm not saying that they can't. Israel's shown a proclivity to do what they want. And we're looking at a panicked Israel. But again, the other thing about politics here is that Benjamin Netanyahu's government is on the verge of collapse. They were on the verge of collapse prior to October 7th. You have large numbers of Israelis starting to protest outside of Benjamin Netanyahu's residence, calling him a war criminal. The narrative is falling apart inside Israel as they become face-to-face with reality that a significant number, maybe even the majority of Israeli civilians killed on October 7th weren't killed by Hamas or other Palestinian fighters, but rather by the Israeli soldiers who were overreacting violently. Stories come out about a woman, part of 20 civilians held in Be'eri kibbutz by 8 Hamas fighters who were trying to surrender, but the Israeli Defense Force came in and fired main tank rounds into the building, killing 18 Israeli civilians, all 8 Hamas people. The 2 survivors were one seriously wounded Israeli woman and one Israeli woman who was uninjured and is talking now about her experience. The head of the Be'eri kibbutz talks about the indiscriminate fire of the Israeli force that killed the majority of the dead in Be'eri. Words coming out now about the rave in the desert, that many of these people were killed in the crossfire between Hamas and Israeli security forces. That the Israeli government, through its panicked overreaction to what happened because they didn't have a plan. You read about the stories about a brigade commander who says, I got a phone call, things were going bad. So he gets in his car, he throws in his gear, he gets to his car, he comes to a truck stop, he finds 2 more guys, gets in, he goes in, they set up an ad hoc command post. There's no coordination. They're just going forward. We got to be impressed with the courage of these guys going forward, but they don't know what they're doing. And because they don't know what they're doing, they're running into an enemy. They have no idea who the enemy is, how many of them are. And so they overreact. Every potential firing point, every potential point of conflict gets overwhelming fire superiority to put on it to kill. And sometimes it didn't work. They lost a lot of guys doing this. But the fact is, when the truth comes out about, who killed what on October 7th, it isn't going to be pretty for Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. He's already under attack for rewriting Israeli basic law, separating the judiciary, eliminating as an independent branch of government, subordinate to a politically motivated legislature who can impeach any judge who does things that are deemed to be political in nature, such as, for instance, holding Benjamin Netanyahu accountable for the corruption charges that have been filed against him. He's out. There's already there's movement in the United States to get him to step aside. What happens to all these statements that Benjamin Netanyahu makes today, and then he's out next week. I don't know how long it's going to take him out, but he's out. He's finished. He's goodbye. The next guy comes in. He's not bound by what Benjamin Netanyahu said. He's not bound by any of those policies. There will be policy changes. And when that happens, this whole conflict gets redefined. It becomes more of a political problem than a military problem. Right now, Israel is trying to make this a military problem. It's an unsolvable military problem. They themselves admit they don't know what they're doing. But I wouldn't lose too much sleep over that. We can do all sorts of military math projections, but nothing takes place in a political vacuum, especially in the Middle East, especially if it involves Israel. Israel is losing the support of the world. Turkey's making a lot of move, but they may become militarily involved, meaning that if this continues, Turkey will have to intervene militarily to get humanitarian goods in. Does Israel really want to go to war against Turkey? And if Turkey gets involved militarily, we don't know what's going to happen with Egypt, with Syria, with Jordan. So, Israel has no strength in this, no say in this. They're managing a disaster. They're trying to manage the collapse of a building to prevent a total collapse, keep it limited to the upper floors. The United States is working with them in this regard. I think the United States is trying to get into position to where they can stabilize this and claim some sort of political victory through the stabilization process. But at the end of the day, you're going to get a prisoner exchange. You're going to get a redefinition of how Israel behaves on Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Hamas is going to continue to be in a major player in Gaza, and there will be a Palestinian state, and that's a defeat for Israel.
Scott, I want to bring up now on this program, I'm not sure if everyone's aware of it. Let's talk about your work with Jeff. If you're comfortable with that, we can tell the audience about your appearance on Ask the Inspector. Can we talk about that program a bit and when it happens during the week and how people can find you?
Sure. Jeff Norman is a old friend of mine. Our relationship goes back to 2002 when we're trying to stop a war in Iraq, to stop the invasion. And in 2003, Jeff started organizing events. He was organizing one. I think we first physically met outside of Crawford, Texas, where Jeff had put together Cindy Sheehan was down there she's the mother of an American soldier who died in the invasion. So she was camped out outside of Crawford, outside of Bush's home, trying to have him answer questions about why her son died. And so we were doing a gathering, a speaking event at Southern Methodist University, which is near Crawford. And that's where Jeff and I first met. And it was a success. We felt like we got along well. And so Jeff said, hey, would you be interested in doing this again? And it turned into a thing. And for many years, Jeff would organize speaking events around the country, and I'd be flown out, I'd speak and such. And so we had this relationship, and we've been friends ever since. And so eventually, the whole anti-war thing, died down. We both actually got very, I think, jaundiced about the anti-war movement, very disappointed in it, its lack of seriousness, its lack of sustainability. And so we just went on and did our own thing, but we stayed in touch. And when this started happening, Jeff called up and he said, would you be interested in doing this again? I said, no, hell no. Because I remember what happened in 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, where Jeff and I literally burned ourselves out traveling around the country, trying to generate, support for an anti-war movement, only to find out that the Democratic Party wasn't serious about anti-war. All these progressives they were anti-George Bush. That's what they were. But as soon as it became a Barack Obama thing, they weren't anti, they were pro. They started supporting the same policies they were condemning. And I said, this is enough hypocrisy. I'm done with this. So I said, I really don't want to do this again. And especially, at least back in there was some people who were opposed to the war in Iraq. Now I'm out there articulating that the United States is wrong about Ukraine, about the Ukraine conflict, and there ain't nobody in America, not too many people sitting there saying, yeah, we're on Scott's side. And I'm like, do I really want to just set myself up like that, like teeing it up on a baseball on a tee for T-ball and just let everybody come in and take a swing at me? I'm not really thrilled about that. But as Jeff said and other people said, it's the right thing to do. And, I was one of these people that said, if people want to talk to me about this, trust me, I never called up anybody. Alex, you can attest for this. I didn't call you up and say, can I come on your show? People call me. And And when they call me and they say there's a legitimate need to have this discussion, that there's people that want to be involved in this, then I have a duty and responsibility to do that. That's what good citizenship is if you can contribute to a debate, discussion, dialogue about meaningful issues, then you have an obligation to do so, because America is built on the premise of an educated electorate, people who are informed of the issues so they can vote based upon what's on their head, not necessarily what's in their heart. And so I started doing that. And then Jeff said, we should look at trying to take control of this. And what I mean by take control is I was really getting burned out. I mean, I was doing 8, 10, some days 12 hours of interviews a day, and I was just frazzled. And he said, for your sake, we should take control of this and try and bring this under control. Because I make a living writing. When you're doing a podcast all day long, you ain't writing. And if you ain't writing, the people are supposed to pay you for writing ain't paying you. And no matter how much people might say, oh, we really like hearing Scott Ritter, my wife is like, we got a mortgage, we got bills, the electricity, you got to eat, you got to earn money, Scott. You can't just sit out there and do these podcasts for free. So Jeff said, there might be a way that we can do this and we can monetize it so that you get a modicum of an income streaming in so that you can be more relaxed, and I was against it. Again, I'm just like, I'm good at answering questions, or at least I think that's my strength. I'm not really a host. I don't want to do this. And so we thought about we came up with the idea, well, if you want to answer questions, why don't we have a show called Ask the Inspector? Meaning that I will make myself available for a show hosted by Jeff Norman, moderated by Jeff Norman, where people call in and ask the inspector questions. And I said, you know what? I'm comfortable with that format. I'd like to do that. So we started it. Initially, we started with a 2-hour show on Friday nights, and we had good success. I mean, it's nowhere near like your show or others where people get hundreds of thousands of views, millions of views. I think we topped off around 80,000, 90,000 views, but that's okay. We were happy with that. But then what we found is, even with the 2-hour format, we weren't answering all the questions. So there was this whole buildup of questions that people were asking, and they weren't getting answered, because we move on to the next week's questions, and some of these questions weren't relevant anymore because a lot of the questions deal with current affairs. So Jeff talked me into, again, I didn't want to do it. I'm being just dead straight up honest. He said, you need to do a second show. I said, Jeff, I don't want to do a second show. I'm not even really comfortable with the first show we're doing. He said, no, second show. I said, okay, he said, a 1-hour version. And it'll be, what we need to do is clean up these questions. And I said, well, 1 hour, I might answer 4 questions because I just go off as I do here. I mean, you ask me a question, I try to give a good answer. He said, no. This is going to be speed round, 3 minutes. I said, what? You want me to answer a question in 3 minutes? He said, yeah. So we do a 1-hour show on Tuesdays. Today we do a show. But what we found is, as we did this, is that there are important voices out there that add to this. Yeah. I mean, I have a wealth of experience. I mean, I've been lucky with a life that's allowed me to do some things that are relevant to the big issues of today, the Ukraine conflict, the Middle East conflict. But there's people out there that get their hands dirty in that business. And so oftentimes we bring in guests, and you showed a slide there. We're bringing in a Russian journalist today who has served with what's called the First Slavonic Brigade. He's been part of the Donetsk resistance to Ukraine since 2014, but he's also a legitimate journalist who has reported from the Middle East, from Chechnya, from Afghanistan, from all war zones. So we're going to bring him in today to talk about the situation in Ukraine and the situation around the world. And then, so what we do there is I'll have a conversation with him, and then Ask the Inspector opens up to Ask the Inspector and his guest, and people get to call in and ask us all questions. So we've been doing these shows, and we're working with you, for instance, to get these shows to different audiences. And we're trying to get to break into the Chinese market, which would be fascinating if we can get more than 1 billion people interested in what we have to say. That would be nice. We're very popular in Russia. Very popular in Russia. We get lots of views out of Russia, and we have the funny thing is, even though I'm based in the United States, the majority of my viewers come from international audiences, and so it's a fascinating process. I've I've grown in love with. The other thing Jeff and I are doing is, I wrote a book, and one of the things when I first started the Ask the Inspector, inspector, I'm a weapons inspector. That's the shtick. And my thing is nuclear disarmament. And so I wrote a book called Disarmament at the Time of Perestroika. It's a book about my experience as an INF weapons inspector in the former Soviet Union, but it's also, I call it a template of hope for what's happened today, where we have no arms control. I don't know if people understand today, Russia just pulled out of the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty because it's a sham. Russia's stopped cooperating with the United States on the New START Treaty. There are no nuclear weapons treaties actively being employed today at a time when both sides are modernizing their nuclear forces. We may all die because of nuclear war, because nobody does nuclear disarmament anymore. I used to do nuclear disarmament. I was the first guy on the ground in the Soviet Union to carry out these inspections. I helped write the book on on-site inspections, not just for in Russia, but in Iraq as well. All the on-site inspection activity that takes place today was done by me and people like me who were the groundbreakers in this. So I said, that's why we called it Ask the Inspector. Well, the book got picked up in Russia and published in Russia by Komsomolskaya Pravda. And I was invited to go to Russia on a book tour. So I went to Russia for 26 days, 12 cities around Russia. And it was just one of the most fascinating experiences. And one of the things that came out of it was how valuable this was in terms of educating myself about the reality of Russia and about, because one of the big problems we have with talking about Russia today is Russophobia. Meaning that the American audience is just injected with this disease of Russophobia, where we're blind about the reality of Russia. We buy into every negative connotation put out there, especially that Russia's all about Vladimir Putin, Vladimir Putin, Vladimir Putin. Putin's responsible for everything. I got a pothole in my street. Putin did it. This kind of nonsense. So the idea was, to take this experience and capture it and make a documentary film called Waging Peace. And we're in the process of making that film. And one of the things that we're doing, so that film is an outgrowth of the Ask the Inspector experience. I'm writing it. The film is actually a dual purpose. I'm writing a book about it. So the book and the documentary will come out at the same time. But nothing happens for free. So one of the things we do is we do some fundraising in support of that. And I think one of the interesting things is when I went over to Russia, my wife and I have this thing. I was like, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to meet a lot of people. And I got to have something to give them. She goes, get them an I Love New York keychain. And I went, they aren't going to like an I Love New York keychain. She's like, no. Get them an I Love New York keychain. I said, no. I'm a military guy. I'm going to make a challenge coin. She's like, they don't want a challenge coin. The Russian people won't even understand the challenge coin. And I said, yeah, I'll get them to understand. So we made the coin. It was about the book tour. So it's the book is there. On the other side is sort of the philosophy, one handshake at a time. The idea is that I was going to go over there and try to improve U.S.-Russian relations one handshake at a time. And I made up 200 of these coins, and I was giving away. Then I got to Moscow, and they put me on this big TV program, Channel 1, with their big one of their big presenters. And her thing was the word. She picks a word. What is the word that you're going to use to describe your thing? And I didn't know what I was going to be my word was. I had one of these coins in my pocket because I was going to give her the coin after the show. And so finally I went, I got the word friendship. And so she asked me, and I pulled out the coin while the cameras were rolling, and I explained the coin, and I slid the coin over to her, and I shook her hand. And this became sort of a defining moment, like all Russia saw it. Well, that coin became very popular in Russia at that point in time. We actually were going to Chechnya at some point in time, and I was told by my host, he said, you better save some coins when you get to Chechnya, because if you roll into Chechnya with no coins, you may not roll out of Chechnya. So, I hope he was being facetious, but the point is the coin became very popular. And so we came back here to the United States. I had no coins left. And I talked about it with Jeff, and people, I wrote an article about the coin in my Substack, and people said, hey, how can we get a copy of the coin? I'm like, well, you can't get a copy because we got rid of them all. So Jeff and I talked about it. We said, well, why don't we have some more coins made, and then we can offer them and use this to raise money for the movie, because we need money for the movie. And so I had an additional 300 coins produced. Each one is uniquely numbered, and I made up some certificates that accompany the coin. And on the certificate, there's QR codes, so you can take your smartphone and scan in the QR code. One will show you that moment where I hand the coin over to the lady and that exchange to put the coin in perspective. The other one will take you to the article I wrote on Substack about the coin, and then the third one will take you to a site that will show you the progression that we're making with the movie as we get trailers, as we do some pretty exciting stuff. I'm going back to Russia, and we'll be working with some. I'm bringing over a very well-known American. I say I'm bringing. He's coming with me. Malcolm Byrne, who is a very well-known composer and producer. He's produced a lot of big acts out there that everybody knows. He's coming over, and hopefully we're going to be working with some well-known Russian musicians to come up with unique music for this film, which when we marry up with some of the cool animation we're doing for the film, will turn into, I guess, music videos that can play. But so there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. But we did 300 coins, and apparently I've been told that I need to order more. I was worried that no one was going to be interested in these coins. Apparently they're selling like hotcakes, so we're in the process of ordering more coins. But if anybody's interested in that, go to ScottRitterExtra.com or go to ScottRitterMerch.com and order a coin, a challenge coin. It's a cool symbol of what I'm trying to do, improve U.S.-Russian relations. Let me give you a secret about the coin, though. If you order the coin, and I'll have the list of names, you better carry it on you if you ever meet me, because the way the challenge coin works is that if we're in a bar, and I think I know you got a coin, I know you physically ordered one, and I got my coin in my pocket, I've got to make a gamble right now. Do you have the coin or do you not? If I don't think you do, I put my coin on the table, slide it to you, and if you can't produce your coin, I drink free all night. That's the whole purpose of the challenge coin. I drink free all night. Now, if you go, aha, and you put your coin on the table, you drink free all night. It's a challenge coin. It's sort of a gimmicky thing. The military did. Every fire department that I worked with in the United States had a challenge coin. A lot of non-military people are starting to come up with challenge coins. It's just it's a cool thing. You don't have to drink alcohol. You can drink Diet Coke. You can drink water. It's not about getting drunk. It's about the concept of something that links us together in a joint cause. So this is a challenge coin related to waging peace, making a friendship between the United States and Russia, one handshake at a time. And if you'd like one, order one. It'll definitely help them the movie.
So the viewers, and thank you for that, Scott, as well, everyone, you know where to get that coin. You get it at, let me just pull this other banner off there. You get it at ScottRitterMerch.com, as well as all the viewers right now. Just earmark this website here, U.S. Tour of Duty. Don't worry, I've put it in the link of the description of this live stream. So after the live stream's over, go directly to that YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and there will be a show, I think, there today already for you guys. So, that's quite the good deal if you want more of Scott. And I tell you, Jeff is a really awesome guy. We are making inroads into China for Scott here, working with Scott to get that voice out all over this country. And you think you sold out some cities in Russia, you're definitely going to sell out some cities here in China. There are people that are watching your videos. The audience is building by the day. Scott, what you're doing is absolutely amazing. Let's get back to a couple of questions here now that I had throughout the show. Someone wanted an update on Ukraine, saying that is the end near for Zelensky, and is the money drying up? Maybe you can help us see the light of day on this issue.
I will. I just want to answer. My wife told me a long time ago to stop reading comments in the thing, but every once in a while I see one that just cracks me up. It was somebody who I invited to a debate earlier. But
is he in our thing today?
They're in there. The question was from El Hartuv. Let's drink Maccabee beer, Scott. And I guess the comment is about that, but I would drink Gold Star, not Maccabee. I'm familiar with both. Like I said, I spent 4 years in Israel, and I drank a lot of Gold Star beer with my Israeli friends, my Israeli compatriots, and my Israeli colleagues. So nice try, but I'm ahead of you there. So now your question about Ukraine and about Zelensky. I I've been saying for some time now that again, the same framework of calculations that goes into assessing the Hamas-Israeli conflict can be used with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. War is an extension of politics by other means, meaning that there will always be a political solution that is linked to the military activity. Russia has defined its two principal goals on Ukraine: demilitarization, that is to get rid of NATO military influence in Ukraine, and denazification, which means to get rid of the Banderist ideology. That is Stepan Bandera, a Ukrainian nationalist who rose to prominence in the 1930s and the 1940s, was collaborating with Adolf Hitler in the Nazis to kill Jews, to kill Poles, to kill Russians. Afterwards, he moved to Germany, where he worked with German intelligence, British intelligence, French intelligence, and American intelligence to facilitate an ongoing Cold War conflict where the intelligence services would use his stay-behind forces in Ukraine as a mechanism of disrupting and destabilizing the Soviet Union. By 1953-54, these forces had been wiped out, but Stepan Bandera still lived in Germany. He was assassinated, I believe, in 1959 by a Soviet agent. But the point is, denazification is about getting rid of Bandera. People may not know this, but Bandera is a national hero in Ukraine, so they literally glorify a man who collaborated with the Nazis to kill tens of thousands of Jews, hundreds of thousands of Poles, hundreds of thousands of Russians. They have streets named in his honor. They have statues, monuments in his honor. And the underlying philosophy of Banderist ideology is the supremacy of the Ukrainian race, which leads them to view the Russians and the Poles and the Jews as subhumans. So the Russians are saying, that's done. We're getting rid of Nazis, and Banderists are Nazis. That's a political solution. So the military process has been taking place. And I said, starting in January, I said that the military math will not play out well for Ukraine. And if things keep going the way they're going, Ukraine will exhaust their ability to sustain this conflict in a meaningful fashion by late summer, early fall. Well, I think we're into mid-fall right now. So I've been off by sort of a half a cycle. Call me the world's worst analyst if you want to. I'll take the hit. But the exhaustion has occurred. There is nothing left for the Ukrainian military, and they're in the process of trying to seek what they call a freezing of the front, but Russia's not going to accept the freezing of the front because, as I pointed out, as Ukraine burns through their resources, Russia continues to husband theirs, and now Russia is sitting on a force of 200,000, 300,000 men that have yet to be committed to this fight, who are now going to be committed to this fight, and they're going to begin the process of pushing the Ukrainians back gradually. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a gradual push throughout the fall into winter until the Ukrainian army collapses, and they will collapse. So that strategic defeat that I predicted in January has occurred right now. Even General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian forces, has acknowledged it. He gave an interview where he said, we don't have anything left. We've got nothing. The Ukrainians right now are begging for money. Not just for money. If you can't give me money, give me credit. I mean, imagine if I went to the bank, broke, over leveraged, I borrowed everything, and I went to the bank and I said, I know I mortgaged my house and I know I owe you a lot of money on that mortgage, but hell, let me mortgage it again and just give me money. Give me money. No bank would do that. So no one's going to give Ukraine money. It's a lost cause. Zelensky gave an interview in The Economist, or no, was it The Economist or Time Magazine? It might have been Time Magazine. I think it was Time Magazine, where if you read it, it's just pathetic. It's pure pathos. He's a man who somehow continues to believe in the fiction that was created to build him up to begin with. He believes that he is the savior of Ukraine, that he's the man that's going to get this done, but nobody wants to meet with him anymore. Nobody's talking to him. Nobody's giving him money. It's over for Zelensky. So what we're looking at right now is from a human perspective, a very sad collapse of a man who was put in an impossible situation from the start. He's collapsing. I don't know if he's going to survive this. Right now, we're looking at the beginning of what I think will be a military revolt against him. If this isn't managed properly, you could see a coup in Ukraine where the military comes in and takes over a government that's no longer functioning properly. And then the question is, are they going to take over to try and continue the war? Or are they going to take over to try to, bring this thing to a negotiated outcome? But at the end of the day, Russia's going to get everything they asked for. They're going to get the destruction of the Ukrainian army, because that which they don't physically destroy will be called upon to disarm. If you touched a piece of NATO equipment, you're done. And they're going to get denazification. With the end of the Zelensky regime is the end of the Banderists, and whatever emerges will be done with the Constitution that'll be rewritten, not only to prohibit Ukraine from joining NATO. Right now, the Constitution says Ukraine must join NATO, but prohibit Ukraine from joining NATO, but also to ban these right-wing political parties. How that actually manifests itself, will it require the Russian occupation of Ukraine? I don't think so. Will it require a caretaker government in place in Kiev? Yes. But that's the direction we're heading in. This is a strategic defeat for Ukraine. The longer they resist, the more they're going to lose. If they continue to try to drag this fighting out, you say, well, Scott, wait a minute. Didn't you just say that Ukraine was strategically defeated? How could they drag it out? Germany was strategically defeated in World War II on the Eastern Front in the Battle of Kursk in July, August of 1943. And yet Germany continued to resist up until the capture of Berlin in May of 1945. So, there's a lot of dying, a lot of killing left. It doesn't mean that the fighting stops. It means that Ukraine will never again get the strategic initiative put on its side. They will always be defending. They will always be losing. They will always be falling back until the final collapse when there's nothing left. That's the direction they're heading. If they want to drag this fight out, they're going to lose Kharkov. They're going to lose Dnipropetrovsk. They're going to lose Mykolaiv. They're going to lose Odessa. They may lose Sumy, Chernihiv, other places. Medvedev's talked about Russia being prepared to take 5 additional oblasts. And when they take them, they'll never give them back. So that means that Ukraine goes from losing 20% of their territory to around 50% of their territory, and they'll never get it back. Hopefully there's a Ukrainian general out there. If you listen to this program, now's the time to act, guy. Because right now, if you act, you can still get Kharkov back. It's not reached that moment of no return. The Russians will leave Kharkov if they get the settlement they want. But if you continue to fight, you're going to lose Kharkov. And once they lose Kharkov, they're going to sweep down and they're going to take everything. So if you're a general, Ukrainian general, go to Kiev, pull out your pistol, and do something with Zelensky. I'm not saying kill him. I'm saying get him out of office. Take charge. Stop this war, because that will save so many lives. You've let this man, Zelensky, kill between 400 and 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers. You've let him cause tens of millions of Ukrainians to lose their homes, millions of Ukrainian children to live in gross instability. I mean, all these people out there who claim to be Mr. Family Value. You do know that, education is very important for childhood. If you want them to become functioning citizens, they need to be educated. Education is best done in a stable environment. So pulling them out of their homes, having their homes destroyed, losing their father in war, sending their mother off to a foreign country where she's not going to be able to get the job she wants. They'll be going to a school system. They don't understand a language that they don't understand. You've condemned them for a life that will extend into generations to repair. So anybody out there that says they care about the Ukrainians, understand this. Continuing to support the funding of this war means you don't care about Ukraine. You care about your ego. You care about feeling good for yourself. But if you care about Ukraine, this war has to end, and it has to end now.
Scott, there's been comments that Ukraine is running out of soldiers. First, I wanted to get some clarification on that from you. We're seeing it in the headlines that they're saying that, the average age is over 40. I don't know if there's any truth to that. Maybe you can help me with that. And the second one is this territory that, Russia and Ukraine has been battling over, dug in, mined, set up the fronts on both sides, the offensive, the counteroffensive. Is that barren land there ever going to be able to be cleaned up in the next 10, 20, 30 years and habitable? Are people going to be able to go back, live in that area? So first question was, are they running out of men? And the second one is can the people, once this is over, go back and live in those territories that have just been bombed out for the last 2 years?
Ukraine's running out of the ideal manpower to fight a war. Look, your ideal soldier is going to be aged, 18 to 25, physically fit, capable of sustaining the rigors of armed conflict. No sleep, bad diet, physical exhaustion. People in that age group are able to do it. Guys, I'm not saying it's good. Let me just put it this way. If you go to war, you're forever touched by war. You're the person that you were before you went to war will never be the same. You're going to be fundamentally different, fundamentally changed. Even if you walk out, as I did, physically intact, your brain is going to be scrambled forever by just what war demands of you. But from a physical standpoint, the people needed on the front lines to fight the war need to be between 18 and 25 years old in the majority, because they can physically do this fight. Ukraine's burned through that group. There's not too many of them left. That's why they're lowering the age. They're starting to bring in 17, 16-year-olds. They might be physically able to do this kind of stuff, but they're not mentally. I mean, if you really want to screw them up, you're going to break them at a young age. But it's not just about PTSD that will come down the road. It's that they're not mentally mature enough to make the kind of decisions. These are people who will make mistakes that shouldn't be made or manifest themselves, not only their deaths, but the deaths of the soldiers to their left and their right. Or you're bringing in the older age group, people like me, that our heart may be in it, our mind may be in it, but our body ain't in it. I mean, you asked me to strap on 70 pounds worth of combat gear, put on a 90-pound pack on top of that, and sprint across a 100-yard field. You're going to be waiting a long time for me to show up on the other side, if I even make it. But when you get old people, yes, you get mature people, but physically they're just not up to the task. They could fight for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, but at that point there are limits to what the human body can absorb, can endure, and these people tend to collapse. But then I'm implying that these are well-trained people. The vast majority, what Ukrainian army today is composed of, is men in their late 30s, early 40s who have families, who don't want to be there, who don't believe in the cause they're fighting for, who have been conscripted against their will, and they've been given very little training. So they go to the front lines with very little training, very little equipment, and they find themselves in a situation where their sole job is to die, to buy time for a miracle to take place. F-16s, M1 Abrams, give us more money, more equipment, but that ain't happening right now. So buy time. So they throw these guys in, and they just say, get out. There's some videotapes that are quite sad, actually. They show, one of these armored vehicles come up, spin around, ramp goes down, and, half a dozen guys pour out, and they go, where are we? You mean you don't know where you are on the map? You don't know why you're here? You don't know what your objective is? Well, just run to the trees. So they're running to the trees, and they're digging in. All they've done there is create targets for the Russians so that the Russians are delayed now. Now a Russian drone sees that. They call in artillery, kill a couple guys, wound a couple guys. And then these guys are pulled out as the next group comes in and gets dumped on them. And this is what the Ukrainians are doing. So the guys they're dumping in there are just placeholders, 40-year-olds whose bodies are already broken, who don't want to be there, their hearts at home with their families that they've been trying to raise. They're concerned about the coming winter and what's going to happen to their wife and their children. This is the reality. This is why it's unsustainable. They've run out of the effective combat age, and they're starting to throw in people. Look, it's even ridiculous. You got guys who are mentally clearly not prepared to do this, getting their draft notices. You got a guy that was drafted with he's missing a leg, and they're saying, no, there's a job you can do. Well, gosh, if you're drafting one-legged men, it means you're sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Scott, let's talk about the territory, housing, roads, infrastructure that's been bombed for years now. Are people going to be able to move back, live in that area, or is it just toxic?
Well, it's interesting. You speak of toxicity. Let's talk about that. If you go to old U.S. Army ranges back in here in the United States, where we fired a lot of artillery fire, and then the base closed down through the force reduction. We closed bases. We turned those bases over to civilian use. So they go in and they test the soil. The soil where all these artillery, the high explosives, is contaminated. It's a hazmat zone. You have to literally scrape the soil off and put away the chemicals from the artillery, leaches into the soil, gets into the water table, pollutes the water. We're not even talking depleted uranium at this point. We're just talking about the thing. If you can get rid of all the artillery shells, you still pollute the soil. There are swaths of territory right now that have been shelled with more artillery fire than any other place in the world. So that soil is contaminated, 100% contaminated. It's going to have to be dealt with before farmers can get there. But even if they do that, you have unexploded ordnance. In World War One, there's still farmers to this day are still uncovering artillery shells, because it goes in deep, and then it just takes a while for it to work up. It's like getting a splinter in. A splinter goes in your skin and it goes in there deep. Just wait. Eventually, your body's going to evict it out, and eventually the earth pops out these unexploded bombs. But they're still today. I mean, World War One ended in 1918. Still to this moment, we're more than 100 and some odd years later. These shells are coming out. The World War II shells are coming out. Bombs that were dropped by Allied aircraft are showing up. This will forever. And now cluster munitions are out there. These small little bomblets are out there. These pedal mines. One of the things that's happening now is that the Russians put in a minefield, but as the Ukrainians clear the minefield, then the Russians fire these mine dispersal units. So it used to be in the old days when you made a minefield, you have an engineer sitting there and you'd plot each mine that you put in on a sheet of paper, and you had to keep that. And so when the war ended, you had to have an engineering diagram that you could go in and demine. You could say, okay, we put 46 mines in this area, get them all accounted for, and remove them. That's not happening now. You're doing this dispersal of mines. Now, there's supposed to be a mechanism built in these mines that cause them to self-destruct after a certain period of time. Mechanisms never work in war. They work in training some of the time, but in war, when I was in Desert Storm, we used to use something called a gator mine, and you drop the gator mine, and it has a couple sensors on it. It has a light sensitive sensor, so that if a shadow goes across it, it detects movement and it blows up in that direction. It also put out these spools of wire that were pressure sensitive, and if somebody stepped on it, the wire, boom, it would blow up in that direction. And we bang these things out all over Western Iraq because we wanted to stop the movement of Scud vehicles. And we didn't know anything about it because I told you intelligence wasn't perfect, so we were panicking. We put them out there. Now they're supposed to have a 48-hour self-destruct mechanism. So 48 hours after it, if nobody's gone across it, pop, pop, pop. Man, none of that happened. Kids were getting killed. Goat farmers were getting killed. And as a weapons inspector, we were going out to look for buried Scuds, but we were going in an area that had been seeded with gator mines. So we had to proceed very carefully. We'd find it. We brought in explosive ordnance teams, and we had to go in there and and get rid of the gator threat. They were all over the place. You had these unexploded cluster bomb units. I remember once we were in an Iraqi position that we were looking for stuff, and they had tin roof up there, and the place had been hit clearly with artillery. And on the roof, one of the Iraqis banged his head on the ceiling, and all of a sudden you hear this. We're all running out, and these cluster bomb units are falling off the roof right around us. Now, the thing about a cluster bomb unit is they're spin activated. So you drop them and get this little propeller on there that's spinning. And if you drop them too low, it hits and it hasn't activated. But every time you pick it up, you get another rotation. And eventually, boom, bam, it goes off, you're dead. And that was just everywhere. And we bombed Iraq during the Gulf War for, from January until the end of February. This war right now has been going on for more than 600 days. They've got cluster munitions. They got us all out there. God help the civilians that have to live on this land when this war is done. God help them, because it's some of the richest farmland ever. I mean, Ukraine was known for its black earth. And this is earth that will be denied the ability to sustain human life for decades to come, because they have to cleanse it of the toxicity of the high explosive, and they have to get rid of the unexploded ordnances so that people can, but what's going to happen. They're going to go into these villages. They're going to demine the villages. They're going to clean up the roads, and they're going to rebuild the buildings, and people are going to go live there. And some guy's going to marry some girl, and they're going to sit there and have a family, and they think life is great, and they raise this child, nurtures this child, and the 6-year-old child's going to go out and chase the family dog in a field, and boom, step on a mine and die or get their leg blown off. This is going to happen over and over and over again. It's happening in Vietnam. It's happening in Laos. We were there in the 60s and 70s. We just polluted that area with these unexploded ordnances, and Vietnamese and Laotian kids continue to step on these mines and lose their legs. Vietnamese farmers continue to die because of what we dropped on the Vietnamese soil. It's happening. It still happens in Europe, in Kosovo, in the former Yugoslavia, and it's going to happen in Ukraine for a long time to come.
Scott, I want to go on to the Iron Dome here in a moment, but I'm going to play this, if you don't mind, a couple of minute video here that's been going viral. Just we'll give it it's 2 minutes. I want everybody. It's a Israeli lady talking about the situation. We've been seeing a lot more of this happening. This is not just the Middle East countries. These are their own citizens that are actually speaking up about what's going on, and very upset with their government. Let's just listen to the sound clip here from a lady here, and then we'll go. She talks about the surveillance of Palestine. She's Israeli, and we'll talk about the Iron Dome after. Okay, let's listen up to this.
So a couple of facts. I am American. I'm Jewish. My family lives in Israel. I just lived in Israel for the last 4 months. I got back 2 weeks ago.
You dodged the bullet there.
Literally. So what I think everyone who's never been to Israel and to Palestine don't really understand. You don't really understand until you go to the territories around the West Bank and around Gaza, and you're close up and you see the wall, and when you see the surveillance, and when you see cameras pointed towards the settlers, just a couple, and then you see thousands of cameras pointed towards the West Bank and to Palestinians, and those cameras are pointed into their homes, like not just the streets, not the public areas, straight into their homes, into their backyards, on their rooftops. I mean, until you see it, and you see that there are, on the checkpoints, there are autonomous weapons loaded and ready to shoot someone based on video footage, and that those autonomous weapons are pointed on one side. Like, I don't think people understand what occupation means. And I don't understand because I haven't lived it. I have only looked at it from a distance. But what I can imagine is if you're a child and you're growing up knowing that the country that you live in hates you and that they are willing to kill you, having never met you in their life based on just a video image, that the facial recognition and the surveillance and the high degree of technology and spyware that they have guarantees that they could pick off Hamas members one by one without ever blanket bombing Palestine. There's no way that this level of intelligence that Israel has doesn't dictate that what they're doing is massacre and it's genocide, and that the occupation is inhumane, and that it's not based in religion, it's not based in who was there first, and it's not based in a tit for tat. It's white supremacy, and it's dictatorship, and it's power and control and humiliation of a people who have nothing to do with the hostages taken and the people who were brutally murdered. Because yes, that is horrible. Those are my friends. Like, those are people I know. Like, I still have a family member who's missing, and we're giving DNA trying to figure out where they are. We don't know if they're dead or alive. But then also I have Palestinian friends who don't have water, who have for years and years now lost loved ones and children, and have given birth at checkpoints, and who have been humiliated and dehumanized under an occupation and an apartheid, that if you are a child who grows up in that, why would you not fight for your dignity?
Well, interesting. I wanted to play that video. I mean, Scott, this is exactly how you describe this occupation. It's been extremely difficult for the world to actually see it. People are, why now is it that people are taking to the streets and talking about this now? What has changed here in the last 6 months for people to speak up
and really become aware of this?
Well, I think one of the big things is the Ukraine conflict. I think what we've seen with the Ukraine conflict is a growth in the need for independent media, alternative media, that people are disillusioned by mainstream media that's bought into a narrative that is founded more on the ideology of sustaining American hegemony than it is on, fact-based analysis. And so you already had a very skeptical audience built globally that they were questioning the official narrative. And when it comes to Israel, there's nothing but official narrative. I mean, the entire story that's put out there is a pro-Israeli slant. Because of the Abrams Accord, the entire Palestinian narrative been suppressed, diluted, disseminated. And so now what happens is Hamas does something that was, again, I get in so much trouble when I say this, but the genius of what Hamas did, because it was genius, they changed the entire paradigm. By attacking Israel the way they did, it wasn't a terrorist action. This was a military campaign designed to humiliate the Israeli Defense Force, to humiliate Israeli intelligence, to humiliate the Israeli government, and it succeeded beyond their wildest imaginations. It succeeded, and it created a whole new paradigm, because now the myth of Israeli invincibility has been burst. It's burst. So people, had they done a little terrorist attack, then Israel could still say, yeah, we're Israel, we're flexing, we're there. It's gone. They got a military, they can do stuff, but nobody's sitting there going, the Israelis are invincible, because they got slapped around by Hamas. No one can say the Israeli intelligence is the greatest intelligence service in the world. They just had the greatest intelligence failure in the world. And nobody can say that Benjamin Netanyahu is the security guy. We may not like him, but he's all about security. He just submitted Israel to, created the conditions for the worst day in Israel's history in terms of security failures. And so you have this, and what happened is you have you have governments that are accustomed to controlling the media narrative, and you have the media desperately trying to redefine reality to take control of the narrative. Hamas is terrorists, the Israelis are the most moral army in the world, and everybody's going, wait a minute, no, Hamas ain't, that's not terrorism, that's military action, and you guys are bombing civilians. They lost control of the narrative, and the alternative media stepped in and taken control of it. And so this is leading to these mass demonstrations, people finally stepping up and saying, we don't buy into the lies anymore. We had a global population that was pre-programmed this time to reject the spin coming from government-controlled media outlets. And I think this has helped contribute to this immediate, tremendous outpouring of not just support for Palestine, but revulsion against what Israel is doing and what Israel has become.
Scott, let's talk about the Iron Dome. Can that save Israel?
Well, I don't know. No defense system saves anybody. Every defense can be overcome. The Iron Dome was created to provide protection against a very specific class of weapons. Israel was overwhelmed in 2006 by the unguided Katyusha rockets, 122 millimeter rockets fired by Hezbollah into northern Israel. And one of the reasons why Israel lost that conflict is that they had lost the political ability to sustain this war, because Hezbollah never stopped firing. They had to bring an end to the rockets. So when that happened, they said, how do we nullify Hezbollah's advantage? So they created the Iron Dome. It was created together with the United States. And they, the system is designed to go up against this kind of rocket. It's an innovative system. It's heavily dependent upon radars that detect the incoming. The radars do, they have an overlay of what targets are worthy of protection, where empty fields are. And if the radar determines that a rocket's heading to an empty field, they don't intercept. If a radar determines a rocket is heading towards an area that needs protected, then they'll fire one of these special interceptor rockets that is responsible for that. So the radar's told this rocket to hit this missile, and that rocket maneuvers. And so when you mass fire these rockets, you'll see, 50, Hamas rockets come in towards Israel. The radar system is going to look at the 50 and go, 10 of them, don't worry about it. They're going to go places we don't care. 40 we have to hit, and pop, 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 pop. 40 Israeli interceptors come out, and you see this big dance in the sky as they maneuver, and they each one take out the rocket they're supposed to. And they work against most of Hamas rockets. But as you increase the sophistication of the munition, so it comes in at a higher speed, maybe it can maneuver itself, it's going to get through. Plus, no system's perfect. We've seen malfunctioning rockets, and if you designate one interceptor rocket for one rocket and your interceptor malfunctions, that rocket's going through. It's going to hit the ground, blow up where you don't want it to blow up. And we see that too. But by and large, Iron Dome is a good system against that weapon. Here's the problem, though. It costs Hamas $25,000 to produce that rocket. It costs Israel, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that interceptor. The math alone means this is unsustainable. As Hamas floods in these cheap rockets, Israel's blowing through this ammunition, and they're running out of ammunition. They called the United States and said, we need an emergency resupply. The United States sent our 2 Iron Dome units with all of our ammunition. We had 300 some odd rounds to spare for them. This is why Israel's very frightened of Hezbollah, because right now the Iron Dome is running out of rockets for Hamas. And if Hamas is able to sustain the bombardment, Israel's in deep trouble. But if Hezbollah comes in, they got nothing left. Hezbollah will burn through the Iron Dome the first day. And then after that, Israel is naked. And then the rockets come in. And these are precision-guided rockets, not the old unguided rockets. These will hit exactly the targets they want, and they will annihilate Israel. Israel's a small country, and when you remove the deserts and the mountains and stuff, and you just focus on population centers, industrial centers, military centers, there aren't that many targets. And if you got 100,000 precision-guided munitions, there ain't 100,000 targets in Israel. It'll be the end of Israel. And they know it. So Iron Dome is somewhat effective against a limited target set, but it won't save Israel from either Hamas if they keep firing. As you see, more and more missiles are hitting now. Hamas is firing, and the Israelis have to be a little bit more selective on their response because they just don't have that many missiles left. They've burned through their stockpile.
We keep seeing the neocons really trying to antagonize the Iranians to get involved in this. What would be the strategy for that? I mean, the Nikki Haley's, the neocons in Washington that really want to point all the fingers at the Iranians. Is it about oil? Is it about what is it about?
It's not about oil. It's that we don't like Iran. Plain and simple. Nikki Haley is part of a neoconservative core that even extends into neoliberals that have never forgiven Iran for what they did in 1979 when they took over an American embassy and held Americans hostage for 400 some odd days. We've as a nation, we've never forgiven Iran for that. We continue to hold the theocracy accountable for that. We've also bought into Iran as an existential threat to Israel through a nuclear program that we characterize as a weapons program, but there's no evidence to sustain that notion. There is no evidence of Iranian weaponization of their nuclear enrichment program. Doesn't mean that they couldn't down the road. The core of a nuclear weapons program is enrichment capacity. Iran has a very sophisticated, highly developed, advanced enrichment infrastructure in place. We find Iran's ability to overcome economic sanctions to continue this to be frustrating. Iran has outfoxed us at the negotiating table. We shoot ourselves in the foot by withdrawing from the Iran nuclear agreement. Iran didn't succumb to sanctions. So all these people that allowed Iran to be defined, as anti-American because they took over the embassy as pursuing nuclear weapons because Israel has defined it that way, are frustrated that Iran is beating us diplomatically. We had hoped that through the Abrams Accord, we could get Israel to ally itself with Gulf Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, to create a bulwark against the axis of resistance led by Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, Iraqi Shias, Iran, the Houthi. We're expanding. We want to prevent them from expanding. So we're going to get Israel involved. We see Israel normalizing relations. Saudi Arabia, China comes in and puts a knife into that tire by negotiating the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which defeats the purpose of bringing Israel in, because the idea was to create an anti-Iranian thing. And we're frustrated by that. We want to have this Middle East, this India-Middle East economic corridor that goes from Mumbai to Dubai, across the Saudi Arabian desert, into Jordan, into Israel, into Greece. We want that to happen. Why? Because we're trying to oppose China. We're trying to oppose Iran. But it's collapsing. We're frustrated by that. So there's a lot of frustration right now on the part of American politicians who need an enemy, They don't want to get into a sustained discussion about the Palestinian cause because that gets complicated real quick. You even saw, John Kirby, the professional spin meister for the White House today, say, well, there's a long history there. It's very complicated history. It's this, that, and the other thing. But he doesn't want to talk about the history because the second you talk about the history, it becomes an anchor around your neck that pulls you down into the, into the morass that is the reality of Israel. Nobody wants to talk about that. So you deflect and you create other enemies. Iran is a convenient enemy. Why? Because like Russia, the American population is programmed to view everything about Iran in a negative fashion. How many Americans know that the Iranians are better at math than we are? How many Americans know that the Iranians publish more peer-reviewed PhD theses every year, original research every year than any other nation in the world? These guys are smart. They're good. They're good at building things. They're clever, and they're not seeking world domination. That's what people don't understand. There's a reason why they took the embassy over. That's because the embassy had been used by the CIA to support the Savak, who was the Shah's secret police, who arrested and tortured these people. Gosh, nothing happens in a vacuum. I'm not condoning that. As an American, I condemn that. But I'm just saying that nothing happens by itself. And if we would just sit down and talk with the Iranians, you'd be surprised what they'd be willing to do to promote peace. And not surrender, not roll over, not be supplicant, but what they'd be willing to do to work with us to achieve stability. Look what they did with the Chinese. The Chinese came in and brokered an arrangement where they are now at peace with Saudi Arabia. Unimaginable, but China did it. I saw a question what China's role be in Israeli-Palestinian peace. Look, I don't know. China would have to define that. Right? I know China has spoken about this, but China's role would be to be a truly neutral advocate for a Palestinian state. The United States can't be that anymore. We have so corrupted ourselves by aligning ourselves so solidly with Israel that nobody will ever trust us to be a broker for a legitimate Palestinian state because they will always know that we will take the Israeli side. China can come in and has not only the record of neutrality and the precedent set by its Iranian, Saudi Arabian diplomatic success, but they can back it up with, one of the big things about what's going to happen in Gaza is how to rebuild Gaza. Who's going to foot that bill? And I'm not saying that China is going to pay for it, but I can say this. China is probably the only nation in the world, especially if they can link themselves up with Arab money from Qatar and elsewhere, that has the ability to come in and rebuild Gaza in a relatively short period of time in a way that would be to the best benefit. A new airport, a new port facility, new housing, modern infrastructure. China can do that because they have a Belts and Roads initiative that's been doing that globally to the tune of $7 to $10 trillion worth of investment over the course of the last 10 years. China brings so much more to the table than the United States, the European Union, any other, even Russia. Russia could come in. Russia has projected neutrality, but I think Russia's goal here, because Russia has a large Jewish population that fled the Soviet Union to Israel, Russia's somewhat compromised by the Jewish question. China's the only nation that can come in and claim pure neutrality on this and have both the diplomatic and economic leverage to turn words into action.
Very good point. Scott, before we round up the show here, a couple things I want to talk about. You are very active on Twitter. I've been watching your commentary with this David character over the last couple of days. It's been quite interesting. And you guys will see that some of the trending things here on Twitter are very interesting here. I mean, Zionism is number 3 or 4 trending word here in the Southeast Asian part of the world. I mean, people are they're getting up to speed on what's going on here. And the reason why I wanted to bring up just your Twitter for a moment is because somebody asked me, they said, can you please ask Scott how much pressure he is getting from all sides for speaking up? Do you mind answering that? Is that okay?
You can ask that. I mean, pressure, there's, first of all, I mean, I'm attacked at every, even just reading through your chat, you know, I'm attacked here. That's okay. I don't care. I'm a big boy.
Sorry about that.
No.
We have moderators.
No, it doesn't bother me. It you know, free speech, baby. You know?
Yeah, all right.
You know, so attack away. I don't care. YouTube did shut me down. Twitter shut me down. The fact is, if you take a point of view that is strongly opposed on YouTube and Twitter both shut me down because of the stance I took vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia. They're both controlled by corporate entities who, at least Twitter at the time, who were under pressure from the U.S. government and from Europe to shut down what they called disinformation, misinformation, basically anything that went against their official narrative. Twitter, Elon Musk, brought me back, and so far I haven't felt any pressure. There's some things about how Twitter operates in Europe. I've had certain tweets that have been targeted and removed. YouTube demonetized us, so that was a big hit. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, when I first started doing this, I didn't know what monetization was, and out of the blue, YouTube sent us a check, and we were like, "What's this? Money?"
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And they were like, "Oh, no, yeah, money." And then their advertiser wanted to come on and pay. And believe me, if you're struggling to make ends meet, this is sort of nice. And YouTube, we've got monetized, and it brought in again, it wasn't the greatest income, but supplemental income stream. I mean, to get a couple $1,000s a month, you're like, I can pay that bill. I can take my wife to dinner. There's things I can do now. This is nice. And then they just shut it down, and there goes all that. We're back on YouTube, but I've been told that I have to watch what I say. I don't watch what I say. Nobody can tell me to watch what I say because I don't care about monetization at the end of the day. You can't pay me enough money to stop me from speaking. I'll give you just a quick war story. After I resigned, Paul Wolfowitz, who was a very important man at the time, he was with Johns Hopkins University's the International Studies program. He asked me to meet. We met in National Airport, and he was going this way, I was going that way, but he said, "Let's meet, let's talk." So we talked, and he pitched me. He said that I was a guy that the Republicans were taking a look at, that they that there was going to be a Republican president that came in after Clinton. He didn't tell me who, but everybody knew who it was going to be. And he said, and your name is out there for a very senior post, not the most senior, but, get down into the mid-level management of the CIA or Department of Defense. And we're looking at you for that. And, Wolfowitz was a man with some, he said, and, we know that you just resigned as a weapons inspector. We can offer you a fellowship at a very well-known Washington, D.C. conservative think tank. We can get you a book deal with this well-known conservative publishing house with minimum number of titles with a set advance fee, which is a lot. When you work it out over, I think it was 3 books, became good money. The thing about advance is once they pay you, it doesn't matter if the book sells, it's your money. And that's just the way it works. It's part of the remuneration. And speaking engagements funded by a certain well-known American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. I don't know which one that would be, but a guaranteed number of speaking engagements with guaranteed speaking fee, which over the course of 2 years added up to be a lot of money. Bottom line, it was a multi-million-dollar package that was put in front of me. All I had to do was say that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. I turned down multi-millions of dollars because I refused to lie. So if YouTube or anybody thinks that they can buy me for a couple $1,000s a month, stick it in here. If you come up with a couple million, look, I'm a certain age and I need to pay out my daughter's college education. So maybe we'll talk. I'm joking. I would never accept it. But the point is, you can't buy me. You can't buy me. It isn't going to happen. If I can get monetized legitimately, believe me, my wife will find ways to spend that money. We have, like I said, college. We had twin daughters went to college at the same time that I went to prison, which meant that I wasn't making money. We had to borrow all the money to pay for their college education. That's our job. But we're digging out of that debt hole. Try going to jail for 3 years, guys, and you lose all your income. And your wife has to work 4 jobs to make ends meet, and you go in debt. We've been digging out of that for a long time. I'm not complaining. Life's life. But I'm just saying that, you know, it would be nice to get monetized on YouTube, but I'm not going to compromise myself to make that happen.
Scott,
but that's the biggest pressure. That's the biggest pressure they put on you right now is money. They lure you in with the promise of money, and then they play with it, and they leave the censoring up to you. They basically, you have to self-censor to stay relevant in the in the market. But I've been, the Ukrainian government has me on hit lists. I'm marked for death. I'm on the Mirthorov's hit list. They want to kill me. And it's not theoretical. They kill people. I've been told I'm going to die. I've been told that I have been marked by death. I've been told that I am a information terrorist and that the Ukrainian intelligence service has marked me for death. The Israelis haven't come out and marked me for death yet, but I'm deeply hated in the pro-Israeli community right now, which is a shame because, as I said, at one point in time, I was with them, but they lost me. What they did with Palestine, they lost me when they started this indiscriminate murdering of Palestinian children, of Palestinian civilians. They lost me when they turned their back on Yitzhak Rabin's vision of peace. They lost me when they continued to elect Benjamin Netanyahu as their prime minister, knowing that he's one of the most corrupt men on the planet. Israel lost me. Israel lost me. I didn't lose Israel. Israel lost me. And if you hate me for that, so be it. If you want to threaten my life, get in line, because you won't be the first people who threaten to kill me, and you probably won't be the last.
Well, Scott, our community here is doing everything that we can to promote you. We welcome you on the show at any time. I hope you're going to come back in a couple of weeks. You're a busy guy. So let's see if I can do. Is it better to email you directly like I do, or should I be going through Jeff?
No. Just email me directly, and I will make as I said, I have writing projects I have to get done. So I've tried to take control of my schedule and eliminate 50% of the interviews that I used to do. And I apologize to those people who keep trying to get me on their shows. You're on a waiting list, and as the thing, but I have to write. If I don't write, that's where I make the majority of my money. And so I have to earn a living because the mortgage don't pay itself.
I get it, sir. Just so everybody, you can see on the screen right now, that is U.S. Tour of Duty channel. All the links are in my description under this video. Once you're done watching this show, go over to that channel. I think it's in they're live in 3.5, 4 hours, something like that. Watch the show. Comment, tell them that you came from Reportify Media. Tell them that you want to buy one of these coins before they sell out. I'll put that up here one more time so you guys can see that. If you guys don't know where to get these, and if you're watching the show, we had a long discussion about it about 3/4 into the show. Scott Ritter merch there. He has the challenge coin. Great story. If you skip that part of the interview or just joining now, you got to rewind the live stream to hear about it. But this is, once again, a pleasure to have Scott on this program. Scott, I think one other thing I wanted to add to tonight's show before we go, and thank you again. I know I held on to you on this live stream longer than I should have, so don't hold that against me. The thing is that I think Twitter has changed the game here a little bit, because we are seeing images that would normally not be allowed on most social media platforms be allowed on Twitter. And I think Elon's saying, you know what? Let's just see what happens here. Closing remarks go to you, Scott. Closing remarks go to you.
Well, I mean, look, I'm an American. I love my country, and one of the foundational, the foundational document that defines who Americans are is the Constitution of the United States. And of the 10 amendments, the first one is freedom of speech. I'm a big believer that we can't be America. And look, we're not perfect. We are a fundamentally flawed nation. We have so many problems that we have to fix. But the way we fix it isn't by silencing people, isn't by suppressing, ideas, even if you disagree with the ideas. There was a famous American Supreme Court justice whose name escapes me right now, but he was back in the 19-teens, 20s. He dealt with Sedition Act issues, etc. Brandeis, I think, is his last name. But he was, called in to pass judgment on this, and he said, the solution to speech that you don't agree with, the solution to speech that you find repulsive, isn't suppression; it's more free speech. The solution always more free speech. The more we can speak, the more we can articulate, the more we can engage in debates, discussion, and dialogue, civil or not so civil, as long as it's not violent, the better off we are as a people. And Twitter, was this tremendous platform that it's just a unique platform that gives people an opportunity to exchange ideas, to opine, to inject themselves into a debate. But after the Russia-Ukraine thing, it was ruined, literally ruined, because it became just another tool of media manipulation, because the government was seeking to suppress things. I got, kicked off Twitter twice because I said things that the government didn't agree with. Elon Musk is, I know he's a controversial figure. I know some people don't like him. That's your business. But from the Twitter standpoint, he has turned Twitter into a genuine free speech outlet where you can say what you want to say, how you want to say it. I mean, some of my tweets probably aren't.
I love them. I love them, man. They're
aren't designed for for family night, because I get a little angry sometimes, and I tweet things using marine language. But the point is, it's there. And I think Twitter's better for it. There's some people who are disappointed because they're losing. What's interesting is the people who are losing the narrative are afraid of free speech because their ideas can't be backed up with language that captivates an audience. Look, if you have a good idea and you know how to write, you can go in and Twitter is a perfect space for you to get an audience to begin this process. Because the beauty of Twitter is I put it out there, you get to comment on it. Other people get to comment on you, and the thing just takes off. It's a wonderful platform for people to express themselves, for people to learn different points of view. The people who are most afraid of Twitter today are the people who were protected by Twitter in the old days, the people whose messages were allowed to go forward unfiltered while they suppress others. Freedom of speech, baby. It's what America's all about. It makes America a stronger place, a better place, and believe me, it's better for the world.